Hello and welcome to ShelterBox's latest update of what we're doing in the world with your money. Okay, starting off in Colombia. Colombia started off with mudslides a few months ago. We dispatched a team and they distributed 65 shelter boxes down in the southwest of the country. That was then changed as the rains continued. There was mudslides and landslides in the middle of the country to the west of Medellin. And the military also started to take over the response in the southwest. So we work with UNGRD, which is the national disaster response mechanism in Colombia, and we've distributed a further 64 boxes to the west of Medellin. They've been remote distributions, subtly different because the security situation in that part of Colombia doesn't support our teams being there safely. So they've done train the trainer very successfully, and that deployment is now coming to an end, and we'll be having a meeting about that and trying to figure out where we develop our deployments in Colombia should things happen in the future. As we've got so many good contacts and so many good working relationships, we need to work on that to reduce the risks for our responses next time round. So moving on to Peru, same event, different country. Flooding, if you recall from last week's update, really extensive flooding. Team deployed, very difficult place to operate in Peru, very large country, very difficult terrain. The flooding has affected lots and lots of people, more than Colombia. They've had to do non-food distributions or non-food item distributions in Piura, which is 1,000 sort of non-food item packs, which has mosquito nets and lights. And we've also done shelter kit response. We've got about 1,000, just coming up to the 900 mark of shelter kits down in Trujillo. And in Piura, they are distributing the non-food item. A standard shelter kit, a shelter kit takes many forms. That is a kit involving tools, fixings, and a shelter element to it. We have a standard shelter kit, which is the standard International Federation of Red Crosses shelter kit, and the courses you can do on that. And that has 2 tarps. It has fixings, tools, wire, rope, a bag to contain it all, and 2 standard tarps, which are 6 by 9 meters. So they're really large, really good quality tarps that last a long time. Sometimes we do train the trainer packages, and sometimes we train the people direct. Train the trainer package is where you are training one person to train others. You can train others directly, but with our small teams, you can maximize the effort and the efficiency by training trainers, getting them to be the instant experts, and then they take that expertise to the people who are building their own homes. So our teams can get amongst it and do more distributions and check the quality and do all of the things that are required for safety and further distributions. So it maximizes that effort, and it also gets the community to buy into their own solution. We don't want to roll out a solution that we think best. You know, we try and give them the skills, and then they bend that and work it to their community because it's their solution that we're helping to provide. So moving across now to Syria. Syria's been going on for 5 years or more. A really serious conflict, starting to get into a different phase of the conflict now, where large cities are starting to fall. The conflict is going towards the government side at the moment, with the squeeze on IS with the coalition and the Russians as well. Squeezing IS, it's starting to spill over from Iraq into Syria, and merging into one big conflict in some areas. And that's means that there's going to be a lot more distributions going on to meet the people that are coming out of those conflict regions. We have 800 shelter kits that have been distributed. We've got plans for another 1,500 shelter kits, and we're also in the final stages of committing about 6,000 boxes, slightly less than that, to conflict in the north of Syria. I'm being deliberately cagey with the details because security reasons and also partnership protection. We want to make sure that we can give you as much information as possible, and not if it's going to jeopardize our mission in Iraq. We will be sending a team to train the trainer if that's possible. If it's not, because it's a war zone, we will be training our beneficiaries in the usage of those tents, and their plans are that they're going to be transit sites. So people who are coming out of the cities and townships that are being destroyed in a harsh conflict, then they are in those tents for a few weeks, and then when they have found a more stable place to live or alternative accommodation or more permanent camps in a safer zone, then those people will move on and those tents will remain, and more people coming out of the conflict zones will be using those tents. Slightly different, normally we give that tent exclusively to that household, but we bend what we do and adapt to meet the beneficiaries' needs, because it's all about what they need and how we can respond for that. So those transit camps have been, or that transit system that we're trying to set up with our partners, is to be the best for the beneficiary moving through those areas. So Iraq, again, another busy element with the fall of Mosul imminent. We've got 2,000 tents waiting for that, just in case the outflux from Mosul overwhelms the other aid agencies' response. We've done 1,600 non-food item kits, which will be blankets, water carriers, water filters where needed, but I don't think they are in Iraq, and mosquito nets. Our mosquito nets are impregnated, so you don't have to let them air for 24 hours, and as that net wears away, then the repellent, the insect repellent and the insecticide is still coming out of that net, so it gives a more even dose over a much longer period of time. So we've done just under 1,500 shelter kits and 1,000 top-up NFI kits, which was meeting the gaps that other providers can provide. We had some stocks available that could just go to those kits to make a full package, because you have to make things that are egalitarian and fair throughout, because if some people's getting more items than others, then it's going to set up jealousy issues and accusations of prejudice. So it's very, very important, and we go to great lengths to ensure that our aid package is the same as others or comparative, and everyone is getting the same. So moving on out of the Middle East, we go into the Lake Chad Basin. Boko Haram violence generating outflux from Nigeria into Niger, Chad and Cameroon, and we're trying to work with our partners and with our teams on the ground to ensure that when those people do manage to make it to those countries, that they have somewhere safe to stay. Cameroon, we're planning to put 1,700 of our tents into Cameroon as part of an ongoing process. We've got 3,000 shelters that have been done over the years, and our next plans are 1,700 of our AMG tents for Cameroon, for people that are coming out of Nigeria. We've also got 100 school boxes, which is, it's not our core thing. We've been doing that since the beginning, and that's to try and normalise. If you look at our theory of change model, it's what are we trying to achieve, what we're trying to do with a tent. Yes, we're trying to bring shelter, but we're trying to normalise, we're trying to bring psychological stability, well-being, all these kinds of things. Then in Niger, we will be, we're in discussions to do shelter kits. We're in discussions to put our AMG tents in there. Now, there's many ways of describing our white dome tent as the ShelterBox standard. AMG is the make of it. So don't get confused when I'm saying AMG or ShelterBox tents. They're all the same. It's our white dome tent that's been around for years and years and years, that gets updated as we go through the years. Now, as our stocks run down, we are now looking at the next generation of tent. The UN and the International Federation of Red Cross are moving on to a next generation of tent. So we are looking at whether that would be acceptable and incompatible with our model. Ironically enough, it's a white dome tent, so it could be said that our model is becoming more mainstream, or the mainstream is coming to us. I'm not going to get into that debate, but going forwards, we might see the next version of tents, so we can get more value for the beneficiary and more value for the donor and their money. Part of that basin, the Chad Basin, is actually Chad itself. We are in negotiations at the moment to do local purchasing, and the 1,850 locally produced shelter kits, which involved tarpaulins and fixings and things like that. And we are about halfway through. There's about 700 of those kits have gone out, and hopefully in the next month or two, all of those kits will have gone out in Chad. That's the first time we've operated in Chad for quite some time. Looking at what else is going on in the world, Uganda has got an influx of people coming in from South Sudan, where conflict is driving people out of South Sudan. A country, one of the newest countries on the planet, but a very troubled history, even though it's short. It was originally one country, and South Sudan was formed a few years ago, and unfortunately lots of violence and intertribal conflict is driving people into Uganda. They've been very successful in dealing with that by integrating them into the local economy, but that's starting to overwhelm them now. So hopefully, with all of the things that go on, and we were looking at the figures this morning, I think we're about 50% ahead of where we should be this year because of all the demands on our resources and our volunteers and our donors. We're asking for additions to the budget to meet this additional need in Syria, because it's a one-off thing in a very desperate situation. So I think that pretty much covers it where we are at the moment. We'd like to invite comment and questions. If we can't explain it to you, then we shouldn't be doing it. If we can't ask your questions what we're doing with your money, we shouldn't be doing it. And remember, we don't receive any government money, so it is you telling us what we need to do with your money, and also us setting our stall out and saying this is what we're going to do with your money. I'm getting a question in now that says, why don't we use food? Interesting question. The reason we don't spread our message is we'd like to concentrate on what we do well, and that's shelter, and get that done to the best of our ability. We want to know that as a donor, you know where your money is going. It's going to shelter. We're not spreading our message. We're not doing greenhouses. We're not doing all sorts of things. It is going to shelter. If that's where you think we should be, your money should be going, then that's you can come to us, and our message is clear. We respond with shelter to make sure people are psychologically, supported, that they have well-being, that they have dignity, that they have that glue that holds their society together while they rebuild on that place that they call home. Because if they form a queue of refugees leaving the country, then they're at the back of the queue when they go to that next country. We've all seen on the news what happens to people who have to flee to other countries. Their deal gets worse and worse as the days go on. So we're trying to keep that glue in that society where they are, where they have land ownership rights, hopefully, and where that society and that culture can best look after them and they get the best chance of recovery. We're trying to help them get back to where they were, to be that gap between nothing and the next thing. We don't help people. This is our question. We've had this quite a lot, actually, particularly with the Calais forcing this question. And similarly, we don't help people who are homeless in the UK or in Europe per se. Not that their plight is any less than anybody else's homeless plight in the world, but our original concept was that we were going to be disaster relief. If you feel that you want to help homeless people, there's some fantastic charities out there that deal specifically for the homeless in the UK, and you could go to them and say, why are you not helping homeless in Colombia or Syria? Because that's their specific thing, and you're not limited to one charity or another. If you think the homeless in the UK need your money, then you do that. We are setting our stall out because that's what we've set ourselves up to do. If we spread ourselves too thinly, we'll become inefficient and unfocused, and our donors won't really know where the money's going. We want to know that when you give your money, you know exactly where it's going. It's going for shelter for people who've been made homeless through disasters, be that man-made or natural. So I think that draws us to a close. Thank you for your time, and I'll update you next week.